right into this. New York City has an office called the Office of Equity and Access, which now has funded college access for middle school. College access is now supporting all of the middle schools across the city. What happens with college access? Students are being exposed to colleges, careers of the future, and kind of being encouraged to think about college. Why are we not doing something like that around the specialized high school exams? Now, there are millions of dollars that are going into college access for all, okay? Why not create a pilot program, specialized high schools for all? Even if you're just sharing information about these schools, careers of 2045, what is the world, what schools are going to best prepare you for that? That young people, let's be honest, if you raise the bar high for them and set the expectation and expose them, put them in a position to be impacted, they will respond. Okay, my research speaks to that. I took thousands of students, same economically and academically disadvantaged children who many people would write off, and poured something as simple as love into these young people. And I've had students that I had guidance counselors tell them, create a different list after I had been pouring into them that you can go on to Ivy League. And then when that time comes, someone is telling you to change your dream. So it's not just about a test. There's so many layers to this. You talk about in-service teachers. What are the expectations of these teachers serving these children? Do they believe these children can go on to specialized high schools? I mean, let's talk about the real. It goes well beyond just the test. So again, expectations, parents having the expectations that these schools are for their children, okay? And not just say, okay, no, you gotta go to the local school.
And then having the money to make these things happen.
Absolutely.
Okay, because when you look at test prep, that costs money. You have to have it. You know, and oftentimes people from under-resourced communities don't have that.
But again,
so automatically they're sort of pushed to the side.
But I think a lot of that again goes back to the school system, because I have, you know, a colleague of mine who has a set of twins. Both of them scored high enough to go to these specialized high schools. They chose a different route, but I asked him about it. They didn't do any test prep. They're in a school and in a community that prepares them and provides them with quality education. And I think we need to look at these schools that some will call feeder schools that are preparing these kids. You have 15% of the middle schools supply over 50% of the students to the specialized high school.
I don't know why that seems like a setup to me. That seems like some kind of pathway setup to me.
But what I'm saying is, these students are being prepared, and we can prepare our students in the same way. The issue for me is when we prepare them, where do they land? Or does it just become more and more competitive because we don't have the seats to because
well,
the kids
we're not there yet, but hopefully that will be where
that would be great. But I'll give you one other example, which is important when you take a look at the specialized high schools. We started out with 3. Today you have 8 specialized high schools. So about a decade ago, you added 5 additional specialized high schools. Okay, so that you could have one in each borough. Today, those 5 specialized high schools in city, state, and national ranking outrank the original 3. So the question is, and this is why I keep harping on this, is why 5? Why should we only have 15,000 seats? Why not 30,000 seats? I'm telling you, those kids that are just missing the cut, those kids that are taking this test and showing that they want to succeed, and a big part of succeeding is first wanting to do it and wanting to do the work. If we have the seats and we have the opportunities, I guarantee you, we will be filling those jobs that they say, and Dr. Morgan can speak to this, the jobs.
So where's the advocacy for this? Where this requires advocacy, right?
Absolutely.
This is the kind of work. So what is the plan? Or is there a plan, or is this part of creating that kind of plan?
I think the Board of Ed is responsible for the plan. But this plan that has been put out, where you take the top percentage. I don't know how you do that. Remain objective and fair. We have testing schools, which
Well, it's not
today,
objective and fair right now, right?
It is.
No, I
would
don't see
say so.
how it could be if you've got kids that aren't able to meet on the same level playing field.
But that is
how can
the
that
system.
Be? Right.
But
so
it's not
objective
but
and fair.
the test,
None of it
there's
is.
a difference between the test
No, I understand
and
what
the
you're
quality
saying, but I'm
education
taking
that's being provided in the community.
And the resources that it takes. You were going to say something.
In one of my careers, I also ran a college prep program in East Harlem. And so it mirrors to what you were talking about, that sense of external support. So it was part of a nonprofit organization. There's the whole College Access Consortium of New York. So perhaps it is something like what you're saying around external support at the middle school level. And to be honest, the college access technically starts at that middle school level. We were just working mainly with high school students. But so I think it has to potentially be that public-private partnership where, and there are organizations like Prep for Prep, and there are other organizations that are doing that outside of the system that are providing the supports. And then it is then the partnership with DOE to do that. Because yes, the same thing that you're saying, you don't want the guidance counselor or whomever in the school to say like, oh, this isn't for you, right? So it's kind of like, how do we do this hand in hand?
Another point I also wanted to make, and this came out a few years back with all the standardized ELA testing, all the standardized testing. Who is creating the test?
Yes.
Is the test, is the student catering to the test, or is the test to address the student's knowledge? Is it what the children have learned? Is it?
Or is it an aptitude test?
Exactly. Who is making the test, and what standard exactly is the test measuring? Because, it may be something very unrealistic, as they found with the...
So one of the things that I will say is that the DOE had a independent consultant, evaluate the test. And the results of that is that the test was validated by this independent consultant, and that is information that's out there. So I would say that for me,
who's that person,
if we need to change the test, change the test. Let's have the test reflect what the children are supposed to
I
be
think
learning.
that go ahead.
I think we also have
Because
to...
there is such a thing called cultural bias in tests.
Well, but I think one of the things that you said that I really like, and it makes me think is we've got to look at the pipeline.
Right.
And even at the earliest stages, by the time you look at first grade, Asian and white students are outscoring Black and Hispanics by about 20 to 25%. So we've got to answer what are those issues and why is that happening? And
I think we know what those issues are.
Well,
it's poverty. It's poverty. It's being under-resourced.
But let's look at pre-K for all is one of the things that I have a real problem with, right?
Why do you have a problem with pre-K for all?
I think in concept it's great, but here's the thing. But do you know that in pre-K for all, you're not allowed to teach these children? It's social
What were you saying,
and
Yvette?
emotional enrichment. When I was 4 years old, I was being
what's wrong
taught.
with that?
I'm trying to understand.
Social and emotional learning is very key to the growth and development.
Absolutely, it's key and should be a part of. But you shouldn't limit a teacher from teaching a child that's able to learn.
You mean like math or
you're not allowed to do
got
that.
it.
You're restricted from doing that. And I think we have to look at how the pipeline and these issues as a community, how do we address it? I'm all for pre-K for all. We need that access. But let's look at what it's really
What are they doing in it?
Well, it's there, and as you said, pre-K for all, there's accessibility, but is it equitable? If you go through all those programs, there might be, let's say, 10,000 programs. They're not all equitable. They're not all teaching the same. We're not teaching the same, or the social, emotional, or the programming. And I think one of the criticisms a couple of years ago or a year ago was that they're not being monitored so closely, and they're not as equitable as far as pre-K for all. So yes, it gives you accessibility. Some are run more as babysitting centers.
That's what they are.
Some are run as more early childhood
Honest.
learning centers. Again, so now whose child is going to come out of that going into kindergarten with the skills of reading a number or lack thereof? So again, it's who's monitoring, who's watching. The pipeline that you mentioned is very important, because it's right now, having accessibility is not enough. It's not, doesn't stop there.
Right.
It is about the quality, and
Right.
it is about who's overseeing and who's working with these,
Right.
programs and professionals in the programs.
Right, because it's accessibility to what?
Right, exactly. There's a
And then,
range.
In terms of this whole issue around equity, and I'm going to go right back to that, it to me is unacceptable for a city like New York City to have 70% of its students that are of color, and only 11% of them are getting into the specialized high schools.
I absolutely agree
And that's what I think needs to be fixed. And the mayor's plan, I think that there are certain good things about that, because we've got to look at some quick fixes. When you're talking about revamping, transforming, renewing the public school system, that's going to take some time, right? Would you not agree?
I would not necessarily agree, because
You think it's going to take
I don't think this is something that's going to change overnight.
a school's culture?
When I look at the system and what these schools have produced, and the fact that, and unfortunately I speak much about Brooklyn Tech, that's where I went, that's where I'm most familiar with. We're going to be celebrating our 100th year in another couple of years. And in almost 100 years, this test has been there, right? So this has been something.
So you're saying if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
Well, if you look at what
Right.
where is it broken? Where is it broken? My opinion
It's
is,
broken because
let's
maybe some
focus-
kids that deserve to be there didn't get in.
Absolutely,
Right? That's
but
where it's
let's
broken.
fix the pipeline. Let's get the quality
Let's fix the
education. We have stripped our communities, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we get quality education back into our communities.
And you know something? I really applaud your optimism and your drive. I'm applauding that.
Yeah.
But again, when it comes to specialized high schools, guess what? There are other high schools out there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and there are a whole lot of smart kids that may not end up in a
right.
specialized high school, but they're going to get to where they want to be
Absolutely.
in the end.
Many of us included.
Yes. So that's all the time we have for this episode of Brooklyn Savvy. We will see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.